What if the one you thought was gone forever was actually still waiting? Tonight's story is about a love buried beneath years of silence, regrets, and missed chances, until one message changes everything. Get ready to feel every heartbreak, every hope, and every breathtaking moment as Emma and Liam's story unfolds in ways you won't see coming. If you love stories with real emotion, messy truth, and the kind of second chances that give you all the feels, smash that subscribe button and join us. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next.
Chapter 1. The Accidental Text. The silence of the apartment was a living thing, pressing in on Emma from all sides. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a Saturday morning, nor the companionable hum of a shared evening. This was the vast, echoing silence left behind when a 4-year relationship had finally, irrevocably, imploded. The last argument, a slow, agonizing bleed rather than a sudden explosion, had ended hours ago, leaving her numb, hollowed out, and utterly alone on her living room floor. She was vaguely aware of the wine bottle, half empty and glinting dully in the low light, a silent testament to her attempt to drown out the noise in her head. The only other illumination came from the unforgiving glow of her phone screen, currently displaying the time, 1:47 a.m. Too late for anything sensible, too early for oblivion. Her thumb moved aimlessly, scrolling through a digital graveyard of contacts and apps, a mindless rhythm against the crushing weight in her chest. Each swipe was an attempt to fill the emptiness, to distract from the gaping hole where a shared future used to be. Every shared memory, every inside joke, every unspoken understanding felt like shrapnel tearing through her. Just hours ago, she'd been planning summer trips, debating paint colors for a hypothetical future apartment, sketching out a life intertwined with Mark's. Now, that tapestry had been ripped to shreds, leaving her exposed to a chilling draft of solitude. And then there it was, his name, Liam Carter. Her thumb froze. It was like seeing a ghost in the machine, a name resurrected from a past she'd meticulously sealed away. Liam. The one who used to text her good night without fail, a simple ritual that had once felt like the strongest anchor in her turbulent college years. The one she'd let go, a decision shrouded in the murky justifications of ambition and real futures, when life had felt too complicated to accommodate anything less than a perfectly linear path. 2 years. 2 years since she'd heard his voice, seen his face, or even allowed herself to think of him for more than a fleeting guilt-laced moment. A strange ache, deeper than the fresh wound of her breakup, bloomed in her chest. It wasn't Mark she was thinking of. Not truly. It was the absence of a connection she'd once believed was unbreakable, a different kind of loss, one she'd never fully grieved. There was a raw, primal need to feel something real, something that cut through the numbness and the polite veneer of her recent heartbreak. Mark's departure had left her with a rational understanding of loss. Liam's absence had always been an emotional void. Her fingers, seemingly acting on their own volition, tapped his contact. The screen changed to an empty message box. What was she doing? This was insane. He probably wouldn't even remember her number. He certainly wouldn't care. He was a successful screenwriter now, living a life she could only glimpse through the occasional, carefully curated social media post. She was just Emma, sitting on her floor, unraveling. But the impulse, once ignited, felt unstoppable. It wasn't about Mark. It wasn't even truly about Liam. It was about touching something real, reaching back to a moment when life felt less complicated, less planned, and more intensely lived. It was about the unspoken question that had always lingered in the quiet corners of her mind. What if? Her fingers hovered, then typed, a whisper from the past into the vast expanse of the night. Do you still think about that night in October? It was cryptic, loaded, utterly insane. She half expected it to bounce back, undelivered, or to simply be swallowed by the digital ether. She held her breath, the wine in her stomach churning, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The seconds stretched into an eternity, each one amplifying the ridiculousness of her action. She should delete it. Delete it now. Before he saw it. Before she made an even bigger fool of herself. But before she could even summon the will to swipe back, her phone vibrated. A single notification, stark against the darkness. Liam Carter. Every single day. The world tilted. The air left her lungs. His words, simple and immediate, landed like a physical blow, shattering the carefully constructed walls around her heart. It wasn't just a reply, it was an affirmation. A confirmation that the ghost she'd summoned was real, that the past wasn't as buried as she'd believed, and that perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't as alone as she felt. Chapter 2. Rekindling the Ghost. Emma stared at Liam's reply. Every single day. For what felt like an eternity, the words burning themselves onto her retinas. The initial shock slowly gave way to a strange mix of exhilaration and trepidation. She hadn't expected a response, much less one so immediate and disarmingly honest. Her fingers trembled as she typed, a million questions fighting for dominance in her mind. She settled on the simplest, the safest entry point back into a conversation that felt both profoundly familiar and terrifyingly new. Emma? How have you been, Liam? His reply was almost instant again, confirming he was still awake, still there on the other end of the line, a ghost made real through pixels. Liam. Better now. You? Heard about? Mark, sorry. A fresh pang of something akin to shame, not heartbreak, rippled through her. The news had evidently traveled. Of course, it had. Their breakup, though private in its agony, had been public knowledge to their shared circle, even 2 years removed. Emma, it's complicated. But thank you. It's been a while. Too long. And just like that, the dam broke. From the polite inquiries, their conversation snowballed, accelerating with an astonishing ease that belied the 2 years of silence. They moved from, how have you been? To, why did we stop? To, was it all timing? Their fingers flew across their screens, words and emojis, questions and confessions, blurring the boundaries of time and distance. They fell into old rhythms like no time had passed, finishing each other's digital sentences, anticipating thoughts. It was as if their minds, once perfectly attuned, had simply been in a prolonged, forced hiatus. As the texts flowed, Emma found herself drifting back, the memories washing over her with a vividness that startled her. She remembered the precise scent of old books in the college library, the communal coffee pot that perpetually brewed burnt offerings, the crisp autumn air that always seemed to carry the promise of something new. Flashback. College. Fall semester. It was in a sun-drenched, dust-mote-filled writing workshop that she first truly saw Liam Carter. He wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but when he spoke, the air changed. He had a quiet intensity, a way of looking at the world that was both sharply observant and deeply empathetic. Emma, then a whirlwind of ambition and nervous energy, had found herself drawn to his calm stillness. Their first real conversation outside of class had been over a forgotten notebook. He'd found hers, filled with half-formed poems and the erratic scrawl of a mind perpetually running. He returned it with a small, knowing smile. You think too much, he'd said, and instead of taking offense, Emma had felt seen. From that moment, a friendship blossomed, rooted in shared words and unspoken understanding. They spent hours in the campus coffee shop, dissecting literary theory, debating the merits of various plot twists, and, more often than not, just existing comfortably in each other's presence. Liam would listen, truly listen, as Emma articulated her chaotic thoughts, her fears about the future, her dreams that felt too big to hold. He'd offer insights that were always gentle, always perceptive. They were close friends, nearly lovers, tiptoeing around the edges of something profound, a silent current running beneath the surface of their easy camaraderie. There were stolen glances across crowded rooms, the lingering touch of hands when passing a pen, the way his voice dropped slightly when he spoke only to her. The air between them, especially late at night during study sessions, crackled with unspoken tension. But Emma, driven by a fierce desire to prove herself, to forge a real future, that had started to pull away. She saw relationships as distractions, complications in the carefully plotted trajectory of her career. Liam, she'd reasoned, was a beautiful, tender detour, but a detour nonetheless. He represented a softer, less structured path, one she feared would lead her away from the linear success she craved. She'd started dating Mark, who embodied stability, ambition, and a clear-cut vision of a conventional life. Liam never chased her. He simply watched, his quiet eyes holding a depth of understanding that Emma, in her youthful haste, had misinterpreted as acceptance. She never looked back, not truly, not until now. Back in the present, the glow of her phone illuminated the tears on her cheeks. The memories, once neatly compartmentalized, were now spilling over. Liam's texts continued, pulling her deeper into their shared past, dissecting the precise moments their paths had diverged. Liam, I remember thinking you were the smartest person I'd ever met and the most beautifully chaotic. Emma. You always saw me, Liam, more than anyone else. I still do, Emma. I just don't get to tell you. Emma admitted her truth, the one she'd buried under layers of polite society and well-meaning expectations. I've been living a version of my life that looks good on paper, but feels like a lie. The words, once spoken, felt liberating, heavy with the weight of years of unspoken pretense. She was tired of the facade, tired of ticking boxes that brought no joy. Liam's response was immediate, raw, and mirrored her own vulnerability. I kept our last conversation saved in a note file I still can't delete. He detailed how, after she'd pulled away, he'd written out everything he'd wanted to say, every question, every plea, every desperate hope. He never sent it, but he never erased it either. It was a digital time capsule of his unrequited love, a testament to a connection that had never truly faded. Then came the text that stopped her breath, that stole the air from her lungs and sent her heart hammering against her ribs. It was the confession she'd always suspected, always feared, always, perhaps, secretly hoped for. Liam, I loved you back then. I never said it. That's my biggest regret. The words hung in the air, luminous on the screen, a beacon cutting through the dark. They confirmed everything she'd intuitively known but deliberately ignored. They rewrote her personal history, not as a story of a path chosen, but a story of a profound connection abandoned. And as she stared at that line, a new, aching question formed in her mind, one that felt more urgent, more vital than any she'd ever asked herself before. It wasn't about Mark anymore. It was about Liam, and about the life they almost had. Chapter 3. The Moment We Let Go. Emma stared at her screen, heart pounding. Liam's confession, I loved you back then. I never said it. That's my biggest regret, echoed in the silent apartment, reverberating through her very bones. It was a truth she'd always suspected, a phantom limb of a feeling she'd tried to amputate from her memory. Now it was undeniably real, pulsating with the weight of 2 years of unspoken longing and missed opportunities. The air felt thick, charged with the electricity of a past unearthed. Every beat of her heart seemed to scream, he loved me. He loved me then. And I walked away. A torrent of images flashed through her mind. Liam's quiet smiles, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the comfortable silences they shared that spoke volumes. She remembered the subtle shifts in his demeanor when she'd started pulling away, the way his gaze had held a question she'd deliberately refused to answer. The regret was a bitter taste on her tongue, mingling with the last vestiges of wine. How could she have been so blind? So focused on a manufactured future that she'd overlooked the profound, organic connection right in front of her? Her fingers, still trembling, found the keyboard. There was only one response she could offer, one shared memory that encapsulated the raw, unresolved ache between them. It was the night that, in hindsight, felt like their true farewell. Even more so than the polite, strained goodbyes that followed. Emma, do you remember the rain that night? She waited, holding her breath, for his confirmation. The memory was vivid for her. The sudden downpour, the hurried goodbyes outside her dorm, the way she'd pulled her umbrella higher, shielding herself not just from the rain, but from the intensity in his eyes. Liam, the one where you kissed my forehead and walked away. His reply was immediate, a sharp, precise cut. It wasn't accusatory, but a simple statement of fact that pierced through her carefully constructed defenses. You kissed my forehead and walked away. The memory, once softened by time, now felt harsh and unforgiving. She remembered the fleeting tenderness of her lips on his skin, a gesture of affection that had felt like a final, gentle severance. She'd thought it was a kind farewell, a way to soften the blow of her departure. Now, seeing it through his eyes, it was a dismissal, a quiet abandonment. I didn't just walk away, Emma. The new text appeared, and Emma felt a cold dread creep up her spine. There was more to that night, a part she hadn't known, a layer of his pain she'd been oblivious to. I waited, outside your dorm, for an hour, soaked to the bone, hoping you'd come back out, hoping you'd change your mind. But you never did. You were already with someone else. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. An hour. In the rain. Waiting for her. while she, oblivious and self-absorbed, was likely already inside, perhaps even texting Mark, solidifying the very decision that was breaking Liam's heart. The image of him standing there, alone and drenched, filled her with a profound, sickening shame. She had been so consumed by her own narrative, her own pursuit of a real future, that she hadn't even considered the immediate, devastating impact of her choices on him. He hadn't just accepted her decision. He had been left heartbroken and hopeful in the rain, a silent vigil she had never known about. The tension between them, stretched taut across the digital divide, became almost unbearable. It wasn't just regret now. It was a deep, aching sorrow for the pain she had inadvertently caused, for the love she had so carelessly dismissed. Emma? Liam, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I know. You were just moving on. I get it. But he didn't get it, not entirely. Not in the way that absolved her. His understanding only magnified her guilt. They continued to text, the conversation spiraling deeper into the raw, unhealed wounds of their past. They peeled back layers of unspoken resentment, unaddressed questions, and the lingering echoes of what could have been. They both admitted it. They never got over each other. The confession was liberating and devastating all at once. It wasn't just a college crush that had faded. It was a profound, foundational connection that had been severed but never truly healed. They had simply learned to live around the missing pieces, constructing lives that looked complete on the surface, but were subtly, irrevocably shaped by the void Liam and Emma had left in each other. Emma had sought stability, success, and a predictable path, only to find it empty. Liam had poured himself into his work, creating stories, perhaps, to fill the narrative gap she had left in his own. The late hour, the raw emotions, the fresh heartbreak Emma carried, all conspired to strip away their defenses. There was no pretense left, just two souls laid bare, acknowledging a truth they had both denied for far too long. The conversation felt like a catharsis, a painful but necessary surgery on old wounds. Then, as the digital dawn began to break, Liam sent one final message for the night, a question that hung in the air, weighted with all the unspoken possibilities of their past and the terrifying uncertainties of their future. It wasn't a demand, but an invitation, a challenge, a desperate plea. Liam, if I called you right now, would you pick up? Emma stared at the words, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Pick up? To what? To the raw, exposed emotions that were swirling around her? To the terrifying prospect of hearing his voice after so long, knowing what she now knew? The thought of it sent a jolt of fear through her, fear of the intensity, fear of the unknown, fear of what she might say, or what he might say. It was too much, too soon, too real. She hesitated. Her thumb hovered over the call icon, then drifted away. The screen glowed, the question waiting, but her fingers remained still. The weight of the past, the uncertainty of the present, and the terrifying potential of the future converged into a paralysis of indecision. She couldn't. Not yet. Not like this. And she didn't reply. The phone remained silent, the question unanswered, hanging in the digital space between them as the first faint hints of morning light began to filter through her window. Chapter 4. The Silence Between Us. The first thing Emma registered was the insistent, vibrating hum of her phone. It had slipped from her grasp sometime during her fitful, wine-induced sleep, landing face down on the carpet. Groaning, she reached for it, her head throbbing with the dull ache of a hangover and the sharper sting of emotional exhaustion. The digital clock on the screen screamed 8:17 a.m. Far too early for the state she was in. She flipped the phone over and her breath hitched. The screen was a constellation of notifications, 3 missed calls from an unknown number, and a new message from Liam. Her heart, already a bruised thing, began to pound with a renewed frantic rhythm. The unanswered question from the night before, "If I called you right now, would you pick up?" echoed in her mind, a silent accusation. He had called, and she hadn't. She tapped on Liam's message, her thumb feeling clumsy and oversized. "Liam, I'm flying in for a film pitch. I'll be in your city for 2 days. I'd like to see you. If not for now, then for closure." The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. He was coming here. To her city. The abstract, digital connection they'd rekindled in the dead of night was suddenly terrifyingly concrete. Seeing him, in person, the thought sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated panic through her. Closure. The word was a flimsy veil over a gaping wound. Could there ever truly be closure for something that had never fully begun, never truly ended, but simply paused? Seeing him might destroy the fragile wall she'd built around her heart, the one that had kept her safe, albeit numb, for the past 2 years. It might shatter the carefully constructed narrative of her life, the one that looked so good on paper. What if seeing him made her realize how much she'd truly lost? What if it confirmed the nagging suspicion that she'd made a colossal mistake? But then, a different thought, a desperate whisper, began to form in the chaos of her mind. Maybe it's what she needs. Maybe this was the universe, or fate, or whatever cosmic force was at play, giving her a chance to finally truly understand, to heal, to find out if the missing piece she'd felt for so long was, in fact, Liam. The morning was a blur of internal debate. She paced her small apartment, the silence now oppressive rather than comforting. She considered texting him back, making an excuse, claiming a sudden, unavoidable commitment. But the thought of that felt cowardly, a regression to the Emma who had always run from difficult emotions. This Emma, the one who had just faced the messy dissolution of her perfect relationship, felt a desperate pull towards honesty, towards confronting the ghosts she'd conjured. By midday, the decision solidified, propelled by a strange mix of fear and a burgeoning, unfamiliar hope. She had to see him. For closure, yes, but also for answers. For a chance to look into his eyes and see if the connection that had flared to life through their texts was real, or just a trick of the lonely night. Emma. Okay, where and when? His reply was swift, as if he'd been waiting. They settled on a quiet rooftop cafe, one she knew well, one that held a bittersweet significance. It was the place they used to dream of owning together, a whimsical, impossible fantasy concocted over late-night study sessions, a place where they'd mapped out a future that never materialized. The irony was a sharp twist in her gut. That night, Emma dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that was understated yet elegant, projecting an air of calm she didn't feel. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied a touch of lipstick, her reflection staring back at her, a stranger with wide, anxious eyes. The cafe was bathed in the soft glow of fairy lights, the city's skyline a glittering backdrop. She arrived early, her heart thrumming against her ribs like a trapped bird. She chose a secluded table, ordered a chamomile tea she didn't want, and watched the entrance, her stomach churning with a potent cocktail of dread and anticipation. Then he walked in. Liam. He looked different. More mature, perhaps. His jawline was sharper, his shoulders broader beneath a well-tailored jacket, but his eyes, those quiet, perceptive eyes, were exactly as she remembered them. They found hers across the room, and for a split second, the world narrowed to just the two of them. The moment was awkward, charged. He approached her table, a hesitant smile playing on his lips. Emma, he said, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. It was the first time she'd heard it in 2 years. Liam, she managed, her voice a little breathy. They sat, the small table suddenly feeling like a vast expanse. Their conversation started like strangers, polite and stilted. They talked about the weather, about his flight, about the general state of their respective industries. Each word felt carefully placed, a minefield of unspoken history lurking beneath the surface. The air was thick with the weight of what they discussed via text and the even heavier weight of what they hadn't. But slowly, tentatively, the ice began to crack. A shared glance over a mundane comment, a flicker of a familiar smile. The conversation shifted, eased. They talked about their college days, about mutual friends, about the creative pursuits that still fueled them both. The initial awkwardness began to dissipate, replaced by a comfortable, almost startling familiarity. It was as if, despite the years, their souls still recognized each other, picking up a conversation that had merely been interrupted. Their laughter, at first tentative, became genuine, echoing faintly against the city hum. They found themselves leaning in, their voices dropping, sharing insights and observations that felt too intimate for a first reunion. It was like they were soulmates catching up, rather than ex-almost lovers. As the night drew on, the tea long forgotten, Emma felt a surge of courage. This was it. The question that had burned in her mind since his confession. The one she was too scared to ask through text, too afraid of the answer. She looked directly into his eyes, her voice barely a whisper. If I had asked you to stay, Would you have? Liam's gaze held hers, unwavering. A profound sadness, mixed with an enduring tenderness, flickered in their depths. He didn't hesitate. His answer was quiet, firm, and utterly devastating in its simplicity. I never left. You just stopped looking. The words hung in the air not as an accusation, but as a profound truth. He hadn't abandoned her. He hadn't moved on in the way she'd assumed. He had remained, a constant presence in the periphery of her life, waiting. And she, in her pursuit of a different path, in her fear of complexity, had simply failed to see him. The closure she'd sought suddenly felt less like an ending and more like a beginning of understanding, of regret, and of a terrifying, exhilarating possibility. Chapter 5. The Message That Changed Everything. The city lights blurred around them, a shimmering backdrop to the profound silence that had fallen between Emma and Liam. His words, I never left, you just stopped looking, resonated in her ears, a haunting melody of truth. It wasn't an accusation, but a quiet, undeniable fact that settled deep in her bones. She had been so busy constructing a life that looked perfect on paper, yet so consumed by the fear of straying from her carefully plotted course, that she had failed to see the unwavering presence of the one person who truly saw her. The weight of that realization was immense, a mixture of regret for what she'd missed and a burgeoning, terrifying hope for what might still be. Liam didn't press her, didn't fill the void with explanations or demands. He simply held her gaze, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the cafe lights, a silent understanding passing between them. In that moment, the years of separation, the different lives they had built, seemed to dissolve, leaving only the raw, undeniable connection that had always existed. It was as if they had simply paused their story, and now, here on this rooftop, they were finally ready to press play. As the night drew to a close, a comfortable quiet settled between them. The initial awkwardness had long evaporated, replaced by the familiar ease of two souls who knew each other intimately, even after years apart. The city hummed below, a distant lullaby to their rekindled connection. Emma found herself studying Liam, noticing the subtle lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, the way his hair fell across his forehead. He was still the Liam she remembered, but refined, deepened by experience. Then he leaned in, his voice a low, almost conspiratorial whisper, cutting through the ambient noise of the cafe. I wrote a movie about you. I've just never shown it to anyone. Emma's breath hitched. A movie? About her? The revelation was so unexpected, so profoundly intimate, it stole her words. He reached into his messenger bag, pulling out a slim, black-bound script. The crisp pages rustled softly as he slid it across the polished table towards her. The title, stark and poignant against the dark cover, read, The One I Never Forgot. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it, the weight of the script feeling immense in her hands. It wasn't just a collection of pages. It was a piece of him, a testament to the enduring impact she'd had on his life, a story he'd held onto when she had moved on. She opened the cover, her eyes scanning the first few lines, and then her gaze fell upon the dedication. For E. The story we paused, but never ended. A wave of emotion, so powerful it stole her breath, washed over Emma. Tears, hot and unexpected, welled in her eyes, blurring the words on the page. It wasn't just the sentiment. It was the profound understanding, the confirmation that their connection had been as real and as significant for him as it had been for her. He hadn't forgotten. He hadn't moved on in the way she had believed. He had carried their story, nurtured it, and transformed it into art. She looked up, her vision blurred by tears, to find Liam watching her, his own eyes soft with a vulnerability she hadn't seen in years. Without a word, he reached across the table, his hand gently covering hers, a silent anchor in the swirling storm of her emotions. His touch was warm, comforting, and utterly familiar. There was no grand speech, no dramatic promises, no need for either. Just a quiet understanding, a shared acknowledgement of the profound journey they had just taken and the one they were about to embark on. In that simple, tender gesture, everything shifted. The missing pieces she had carried for so long suddenly felt like they were slotting back into place. They sat there for a long time, hands intertwined, the script lying open between them, a silent witness to their unspoken pact. The city lights continued to twinkle, the distant sounds of traffic a gentle hum. But for Emma, the world had narrowed to this table, to Liam's hand in hers, and to the quiet, profound realization that their story, indeed, had only been paused. Later that night, much later, after they had said their goodbyes at the base of her apartment building, a goodbye that felt less like a farewell and more like a promise, Emma found herself back in her silent apartment. But this time, the silence felt different. It was no longer oppressive, but filled with the echo of Liam's voice, the warmth of his hand, and the exhilarating possibility of a future she hadn't dared to dream of. She picked up her phone, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. It was almost 2 a.m. again, the same witching hour that had started it all. "Emma, still up?" His reply came instantly, a digital heartbeat across the city, confirming that the connection, once rekindled, was now burning brightly. "Only for you." And in that moment, Emma knew. Their story wasn't just unpaused, it was beginning again, yes, with a depth and honesty born from years of separation and the courage to finally look back. Chapter 6. A New Beginning. The soft glow of her phone in the pre-dawn light, reflecting Liam's instant reply, "Only for you," was a promise whispered across the quiet city. Emma felt a surge of exhilaration, a sensation so potent it bordered on disbelief. After the raw emotional purging of the previous night, this felt like an exhale, a gentle confirmation that the leap she'd taken wasn't into a void, but into something real and resonant. The silence in her apartment, once a heavy cloak of loneliness, now hummed with a hopeful anticipation. She didn't sleep much more that night, not truly. Her mind was a whirlwind of memories. Liam's quiet intensity in the writing workshop, the shared laughter over bad coffee, the unspoken understanding that had always existed between them. She replayed his words, "I never left. You just stopped looking," and the poignant dedication in his script, "For E." The story we paused, but never ended. It was a revelation, a complete reframe of her past. She hadn't just moved on, she had actively, if unwittingly, looked away from the one who was consistently there. This wasn't about simply rekindling an old flame. It was about acknowledging a profound connection that had merely been dormant, waiting for her to see it again. The next day passed in a haze of nervous energy and quiet excitement. Emma found herself smiling at mundane things, humming forgotten tunes, a lightness returning to her step that she hadn't realized had been missing. She kept her phone close, a silent companion, and found herself reaching for it, not to scroll aimlessly, but to check for his texts. And they came, scattered throughout the day. Simple check-ins, shared thoughts, a continuation of the effortless conversation they had rediscovered. It wasn't a rush, but a gentle, steady progression, like two rivers slowly finding their way back to a shared delta. That evening, they met again, this time at a small, unassuming bistro Liam had found, somewhere intimate and away from the echoing memories of the rooftop cafe. The awkwardness that had colored the start of their previous meeting was noticeably absent. There was still a palpable tension, an electric awareness of each other, but it was now laced with an undeniable comfort. They settled into easy conversation, their voices low, their gazes often meeting, holding. They talked about the film pitch that had brought Liam to her city. He shared details about the long hours, the nervous energy of presenting his work, the thrill of seeing a story take shape. Emma, in turn, found herself opening up about her own work, the challenges and satisfactions, the subtle shifts she was considering in her career path. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, truly heard, not just by a friend, but by someone who understood the intricate workings of her mind, her ambitions, and her vulnerabilities. "So, the script," Emma began, her voice soft. "Did you ever think about showing it to anyone else?" Liam shook his head, stirring his coffee. "No, never. It was too personal. Too much of a sacred space, I guess." He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "It was always for you, even when I didn't think you'd ever see it." The confession warmed her, a quiet ache of tenderness spreading through her chest. It wasn't just a story on a page. It was a testament to his enduring love, his ability to transform pain into something beautiful and hopeful. She realized then how deeply he had processed their past, how he had carried the weight of it, and how, unlike her, he had used it not to build walls, but to create. They talked late into the night, the bistro slowly emptying around them. They filled in the gaps of the 2 years, not just the highlights, but the quiet struggles, the moments of loneliness, the lessons learned. There was an honesty that felt refreshing, liberating. They laughed about shared college anecdotes, lamented missed connections, and celebrated small personal victories. It wasn't about reliving the past to regret it, but understanding it to build a stronger present. As the waiters subtly cleared tables around them, signaling closing time, Liam's eyes held hers. "This feels right, Emma," he said, his voice a low, steady murmur. "Like coming home." Emma's heart swelled. "It does," she whispered back, the truth of his words echoing her own deepest feelings. They walked out into the cool night air, the city now mostly quiet. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of recent rain. Liam reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, a natural, unhesitating gesture that felt both new and profoundly familiar. It wasn't a grand gesture, not a dramatic kiss in the street. It was just a quiet understanding, a tangible connection. No grand speeches, no promises, just a quiet understanding. They begin again, not from where they left off, but from this new, honest starting point, informed by their past, but not bound by its mistakes. Later that night, nestled in her bed, Emma's phone vibrated. "Emma, still up?" She had sent it first, deliberate echo of their first renewed exchange, but now with a clear intent, a hopeful invitation. His reply came instantly, the screen bright with the words that had become their private mantra. "Only for you." And as Emma drifted into sleep, a genuine smile on her face, she knew this wasn't just a fleeting moment. This was the gentle, hopeful dawn of a new chapter, one they were finally writing together, with open hearts and no regrets. Chapter 7. Navigating the Present. The instant reply, "Only for you," felt less like a text and more like a warm embrace, wrapping around Emma as she drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep she hadn't experienced in years. The morning light, when it eventually filtered through her blinds, felt different, brighter. The air in her apartment, no longer thick with the residue of heartbreak and regret, now hummed with a quiet, vibrant energy. The silence was no longer empty, but filled with the echo of Liam's voice, the memory of his hand in hers, and the exhilarating hum of possibility. Their reconnection wasn't a sudden, passionate explosion, but a gentle start, a slow, deliberate unfolding. Liam's film pitch kept him busy during the day, but their phones became a constant lifeline. Texts flowed back and forth. Not just the deep, confessional ones from that first night, but mundane updates, shared observations, snippets of their daily lives. A photo of a quirky coffee shop he found, a quick thought on a news article, a silly meme. These small, consistent gestures rebuilt the bridge between them, brick by digital brick. It was the quiet intimacy of two people who were genuinely interested in each other's worlds, now that those worlds were tentatively merging. In the evenings, they met, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just for a long walk through the city, rediscovering familiar landmarks with new eyes, sharing stories beneath the glow of streetlights. They talked for hours, filling in the gaps of the 2 years they'd spent apart. Emma learned about his struggles to break into screenwriting, the rejections, the moments of doubt, and the eventual triumph of seeing his words come to life. Liam listened intently as Emma spoke of her career, the quiet dissatisfaction that had gnawed at her, the feeling of living a life that was good on paper but lacked true resonance. They discussed Mark, briefly and without malice. Emma explained the slow erosion of their relationship, the growing distance, the realization that their paths, once seemingly aligned, had diverged into separate, unfulfilling orbits. Liam, in turn, spoke of his own attempts to move on, the relationships that had felt hollow, always shadowed by the ghost of what he'd felt for her. There was a quiet understanding that permeated these conversations, a shared acknowledgement of past mistakes and the painful lessons learned. It wasn't about assigning blame, but about understanding the journey that had led them back to each other. One evening, sitting in a cozy jazz bar, the music a soft backdrop to their conversation, Emma found herself looking at Liam, truly looking. He was leaning forward, listening to her describe a project at work, his eyes warm and engaged. She saw the familiar kindness, the quiet strength, but also a new maturity, a resilience forged in the years they'd been apart. He was still the boy she'd almost loved, but now a man she was undeniably falling for, again, for the first time. "You know," she said, her voice soft, I think I was so afraid of not being successful that I forgot what it meant to be happy." Liam reached across the table, taking her hand, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. "Happiness isn't a destination, Emma. It's a journey you take with the right people." His gaze was steady, meaningful, and I think we both took some detours. His words resonated deeply. It wasn't just about rekindling an old romance. It was about building something new, something stronger, founded on honesty and a shared understanding of their past. They were both different people now, shaped by their individual experiences, but those experiences had, paradoxically, led them back to a similar place of clarity and readiness. As the week drew to a close, Liam's film pitch successfully concluded. A new sense of anticipation hung in the air. His flight was booked for the following morning. The thought of him leaving, even temporarily, sent a pang of anxiety through Emma. They had just found each other again. The thought of another separation, however brief, felt like a regression. They spent his last evening together, walking along the river, the city lights reflecting on the water. The air was cool, crisp, and filled with the quiet murmur of the night. There was no need for grand declarations, no panicked promises to bridge the distance. Their connection had deepened, solidified in the space of a few short days. As they stood by her apartment building, the same spot where they'd said goodbye just nights before, the silence was no longer charged with uncertainty, but with a quiet, profound understanding. He pulled her into a gentle hug, holding her close, and Emma felt a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she'd been craving. "I'll call you when I land," he whispered into her hair. "You better," she replied, her voice muffled against his chest. Later that night, long after Liam had left for the airport, Emma lay in bed, her phone clutched in her hand. The clock on her nightstand read 1:58 a.m., almost the same time as that first fateful text. She typed, her heart full, a warmth spreading through her chest. "Emma? Still up?" The reply was instantaneous, a beacon across the miles already separating them. "Liam? Only for you." It was their quiet promise, a digital anchor in the vastness of the night. It wasn't just a phrase, it was a reaffirmation of his constant presence, a testament to her newfound willingness to look, and a beautiful, hopeful dawn for their unwritten future. The story they had paused was now truly unpaused, and Emma, for the first time in a long time, felt ready to write the next chapter. Chapter 8: Navigating the New Normal. The immediate emptiness after Liam's departure was a stark contrast to the vibrant energy that had filled Emma's apartment just hours before. The quiet was back, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the oppressive silence of loneliness, but the expectant hush of a space waiting to be filled again. She missed his presence, the low rumble of his voice, the easy comfort of his hand in hers. Yet even in his physical absence, he wasn't truly gone. Her phone, a mere object days ago, had transformed into a constant, comforting tether. His text arrived as soon as his plane touched down. "Landed. Thinking of you." And Emma, curled on her sofa, a genuine smile gracing her lips, felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was their new normal, a relationship built across miles, sustained by constant communication and a shared, profound understanding. The initial days were a flurry of digital connection. Video calls became a nightly ritual, bridging the distance with the intimacy of shared laughter and late-night confessions. They talked about their days, the mundane, and the magnificent. Emma shared details of her work, the small victories and frustrations, and Liam recounted the intricacies of his screenwriting projects, the creative breakthroughs, and the inevitable writer's blocks. They sent each other photos of their respective cities, small glimpses into their individual lives that were now, in a way, intertwined. But beyond the initial euphoria of their reunion, the real-world challenges of integrating their lives began to surface. They were no longer college students with flexible schedules and few responsibilities. They were established adults, each with careers, friendships, and routines deeply embedded in their respective cities. The logistics of a long-distance relationship, while exciting in its novelty, also presented a complex puzzle. When would they see each other again? How would they manage their demanding schedules? The questions, though unspoken, hung in the air, a subtle undercurrent to their otherwise joyful conversations. One evening during a video call, Emma introduced Liam to her best friend, Chloe. "This is Liam," she said, a blush rising to her cheeks. The Liam. Chloe, ever perceptive, offered a knowing smile and a warm greeting, her eyes twinkling with a mix of curiosity and approval. Liam, charming and effortlessly engaging, quickly won Chloe over, sharing an anecdote about Emma from their college days that made her laugh until tears streamed down her face. It was a small but significant step, introducing their worlds, allowing the people who mattered most to them to witness the burgeoning reality of their rekindled connection. Liam, in turn, introduced Emma to a few of his close friends via video calls, a fellow screenwriter, a producer he often collaborated with. Emma found herself navigating new social dynamics, learning about the people who had supported him during her absence. It was a strange, beautiful dance, weaving their separate narratives into a shared tapestry. They discussed their families, too, sharing stories and anecdotes, building a picture of the lives they had lived apart, and slowly, carefully inviting each other into those intimate spaces. Yet, despite the joyful reconnection, Emma knew there were still deeper conversations needed. While they had touched upon the past, the raw vulnerability of that first night had given way to the more comfortable rhythm of reestablishing their bond. They hadn't explicitly discussed the mistakes of the past in a daylight setting, the conscious choices Emma had made, or the lingering pain Liam had carried. It was a conversation that felt too heavy for a quick text or a casual video call, a necessary step to truly build a stronger foundation for their future. One night, Liam brought it up himself. "Emma," he said, his voice softer than usual during their call, "we talked a lot that first night. About everything. But I feel like there's still more to unpack. About why things ended the way they did, and how we make sure we don't repeat those patterns." Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been waiting for him to say it, unsure how to initiate such a sensitive discussion without derailing their newfound happiness. "I agree," she said, her voice steady. "I want to understand. I want to be honest about my part in it, and I want to make sure this time we do it right." They decided to dedicate their next weekend call to it, setting aside a block of time where they could talk without interruption, without the pressure of a quick chat. It was a testament to their commitment, to their shared desire to not just revisit the past, but to truly heal it. The conversation wouldn't be easy, but Emma knew it was essential. This wasn't just about falling back in love. It was about building a relationship that was resilient, honest, and capable of withstanding the complexities of real life. As the days turned into a week, then two, the initial intensity of their reunion settled into a comfortable, enduring rhythm. The distance was a challenge, but it also forced them to communicate more deeply, to be more intentional about their connection. Emma found herself feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible, a quiet confidence that the missing piece she had carried for so long was finally, truly, coming home. And she knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her, that this was just the beginning. Chapter 9. The Unwritten Future. The dedicated weekend call arrived, a quiet, intentional space carved out amidst their busy lives. Emma had prepared herself, not with notes or rehearsed speeches, but with an open heart and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths of their past. Liam, too, approached the conversation with a similar solemnity. The screen between them, usually a window to shared smiles and easy banter, now felt like a portal to a deeper, more vulnerable exchange. I was scared," Emma began, her voice soft but steady. "Scared of not being enough, of not achieving what I thought I should achieve. And I saw relationships, especially one as intense and real as ours, as a distraction, something that would pull me off course." She paused, taking a breath. "I convinced myself that Mark represented the right path, the stable one, the one that looked good on paper. And I let go of something truly extraordinary because I was too blind, too focused on a manufactured idea of success." The admission was painful, but liberating. It was the truth she'd avoided for years, the core of her regret. Liam listened, his expression thoughtful, not judgmental. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, his voice gentle. "I saw you pulling away, but I didn't know how to stop you. I thought if I pushed, I'd just push you further. So I waited. I hoped you'd come back. And when you didn't, I just learn to live with it, to build a life around that missing piece. He paused, a wry smile touching his lips. Turns out you can write a pretty good movie about a missing piece. They talked for hours, dissecting the precise moments their paths had diverged, acknowledging the unspoken resentments, the lingering questions. Emma apologized for her youthful ambition overshadowing her heart, for not seeing his unwavering presence. Liam admitted his own fear of vulnerability, of not articulating his love more forcefully. It was a raw, honest conversation, stripping away layers of unspoken history, and in doing so, building trust and intimacy that felt deeper and more resilient than anything they'd shared before. This wasn't just about rekindling a romance. It was about forging a partnership built on radical honesty and a shared commitment to growth. With the emotional landscape cleared, the practicalities of their rekindled relationship came into sharper focus. Liam's film pitch had been a resounding success, leading to a green light for his movie. This meant more travel, more time spent in different cities for pre-production and filming. The long-distance aspect, once a romantic challenge, was now a tangible reality they had to navigate. "What about you?" Liam asked one evening, his voice tinged with concern. "Your job, your life there, is this sustainable?" Emma had been asking herself the same question. Her career, while stable, had begun to feel stagnant, the good-on-paper life increasingly hollow. Liam's passion, his unwavering pursuit of his creative dreams, had reignited something within her. She had started writing again, not for work, but for herself. Journaling, sketching out story ideas, feeling the familiar thrill of words taking shape on a page. Emma's creative reawakening was subtle at first, a quiet hum beneath the surface, but it was growing louder. "I've been thinking a lot," she confessed to him, "about what truly makes me happy, and it's not just the title or the salary. It's the feeling of creating, of connecting. And honestly, being with you, it's made me realize how much I pushed that part of myself away." They began to brainstorm, exploring possibilities. Could Emma transition to a more flexible role? Could she freelance? The idea of a change, once terrifying, now felt exhilarating. They weren't just planning dates, they were planning futures, both individual and shared. Liam's film, The One I Never Forgot, began its pre-production phase. He sent her updates, photos from set, snippets of dialogue. Emma felt a profound sense of pride watching his dream unfold, knowing that their story, however fictionalized, was at its heart. She even offered feedback on certain scenes, her writer's eye a valuable asset, further cementing their collaborative spirit. One rainy afternoon, Liam called her. "Emma," he said, his voice laced with excitement, "they've set the filming schedule. And there's a block where we're shooting in your city for a few weeks." Emma gasped, a thrill shooting through her. "Really?" "Really. And I was thinking, maybe you could come to set, see it all happen, be there." It was a simple invitation, but it felt monumental. A chance to physically merge their worlds, to witness his creative passion firsthand, and to be present in the story they had co-written, both literally and figuratively. The weeks leading up to his arrival were a flurry of anticipation. Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose, not just in her work, but in her life. The missing piece was no longer a void, but a vibrant, active presence. Then the day arrived. The sky, fittingly, was overcast, a soft drizzle falling. Emma stood at the window of her apartment, watching the rain, a full-circle moment that brought a gentle smile to her lips. This wasn't the rain of separation, of silent vigils and missed connections. This was the rain that cleansed, that nourished, that promised growth. Her phone buzzed. A text from Liam. "Liam, just landed, ready for our next scene?" Emma laughed, a joyous, unburdened sound. She typed back instantly, her fingers flying across the screen, her heart overflowing. "Emma, always." She grabbed her umbrella, not to shield herself from the storm, but to embrace it, knowing that this time she wouldn't be walking away. She would be walking towards him, towards their shared, unwritten future, ready for whatever story they would create together. Chapter 10. The Unwritten Future. The soft drizzle that welcomed Liam to Emma's city felt less like a lament and more like a blessing. He stepped off the plane, the familiar scent of her city's rain-soaked streets filling his lungs, a stark contrast to the sterile air of the airport. His phone buzzed. Emma's text? Always. A warm confirmation of her anticipation. He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes. This wasn't just another work trip. It was a homecoming. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity, a beautiful collision of their individual worlds finally merging. Emma spent her days at work, but her evenings and weekends were dedicated to the film set. Stepping onto the bustling set of The One I Never Forgot was a surreal experience for her. The controlled chaos of cameras, lights, and crew, the hushed intensity as scenes were shot, the quiet dedication of everyone involved. It was a world Liam had built, a world born from their shared history. She watched him, mesmerized as he moved through the set, a confident, authoritative presence. He was no longer just the quiet college friend. He was a visionary, bringing his deeply personal story to life. During breaks, he'd pull her aside, his eyes alight with passion, explaining camera angles, character motivations, the subtle nuances of a scene. Emma, with her own writer's instinct, offered insights, her observations often sparking new ideas in him. Their creative synergy, once confined to late-night college debates, now found a new, powerful outlet. It was a profound joy for Emma to witness his dream actualized, to see the pain he had transformed into art, and to know that a piece of her, a piece of them, was embedded in every frame. As filming progressed, the buzz around Liam's project grew. Early dailies were promising, and the studio executives were increasingly enthusiastic. One afternoon, Liam pulled Emma aside, his face alight with a mixture of relief and triumph. "The pitch, it wasn't just successful, Emma," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're already talking about a sequel, and a distribution deal is on the table that's bigger than anything I imagined." Liam's film pitch was successful, not just professionally, but as a testament to his resilience and talent. It was a validation of the path he had chosen, a path that had ultimately led him back to her. Inspired by Liam's unwavering pursuit of his passion and by the raw honesty of their rekindled connection, Emma's creative reawakening blossomed. She found herself drawn back to her own writing, not just journaling, but actively working on a novel she'd conceptualized years ago but had always deemed too impractical, too personal. The story, once dormant, now flowed from her with an effortless grace. She spent her evenings after work and her mornings before, hunched over her laptop, the words pouring out. She shared snippets with Liam, who became her most ardent, insightful reader. His encouragement, a powerful catalyst. It wasn't about external validation. It was about reclaiming a vital part of herself, a part she had suppressed in her pursuit of a real future. She realized that her real future wasn't about a predefined path, but about living authentically, creatively, and with an open heart. The logistics of their lives, once a daunting obstacle, now felt less like a problem and more like an adventure. They discussed the future openly, honestly. Liam's work would continue to take him to different cities, but Emma's newfound creative freedom meant she could work from anywhere. They talked about extended visits, about finding a central base, about weaving their lives together in a way that honored both their individual ambitions and their shared commitment. There was no rigid plan, but a flexible, evolving understanding that their priority was to be together, whatever that looked like. One evening, after a particularly long day on set, Liam and Emma found themselves walking through the city. The sky had opened up, a sudden torrential downpour soaking the streets. People scattered, seeking shelter, but Liam simply stopped, pulling Emma closer under the meager protection of a shop awning. The rain lashed down, mirroring the night 2 years ago when he had waited for her, soaked and heartbroken. But this time, it was different. Liam looked at her, his eyes shining amidst the glistening drops on his face. He didn't say a word, but his gaze was full of an overwhelming love, a silent acknowledgement of their journey. Emma, without hesitation, stepped out from under the awning, pulling him with her. The rain immediately plastered her hair to her face, soaked her clothes, but she didn't care. She looked up at him, a wide, uninhibited smile spreading across her face. This was their full circle moment, not a moment of regret, but of profound gratitude. She reached up, her hands cupping his face, and pulled him down for a deep, lingering kiss. The rain streamed around them, cold and cleansing, but their kiss was warm, passionate, full of years of unspoken longing and newly found hope. They were embracing the storm together, no longer letting it separate them, but allowing it to wash away the last vestiges of doubt and fear. They stood there for what felt like an eternity, oblivious to the world, lost in the pure, unadulterated joy of their reunion. The past was no longer a shadow, but a foundation, a testament to the enduring power of their connection. As the rain finally began to subside, leaving the city glistening under the streetlights, Liam pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against hers. "Our story," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "It's just getting started, isn't it?" Emma looked into his eyes, her heart overflowing. "It never ended," she corrected softly. "We just needed to find our way back to the next chapter." And so, they walked on, hand in hand, into the glistening, rain-washed night. The future was unwritten, filled with possibilities, challenges, and the promise of a love that had defied time and circumstance. They had found their way back, not to the people they once were, but to the people they were always meant to become, together. Their story, paused for too long, was now unfolding, vibrant and alive, a testament to the enduring power of a love that truly never forgot.
And just like that, their story isn't over. It's only just the beginning. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and be the first to dive back into our beautiful stories. Thanks for listening. See you in the next one.